encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate your dedication to our republic. You know, I posted a story the other day and a couple of YouTube videos called 90 Days That Will Change the World. And I think it's imperative that each and every one of us understand exactly what we can do to participate. And we have to start with never asking or saying please again. You know, 237 some odd years ago, a group of guys got together in Philadelphia and decided that they were going to tell King George enough was enough. So I ask you today, are you at that point? I mean, let's remember, they said that enough was enough when they went to war over something as little as taxes and on tea and stamps. They were ordered to disarm by a king, and they had abuse that is far less intrusive then than what we experience in our nation today. But you've been conditioned to be law-abiding. This 4th of July, millions of Americans are going to go out and celebrate the 4th of July. But I wonder exactly how many of them actually consider what they're celebrating. I mean, the colonists didn't beg the king to change the way he was doing business. In fact, they tried repeatedly to request politely that he cease and desist. In fact, the Declaration of Independence very clearly states the great lengths to which they went to try to get the king to back off. Instead, the king just kept oppressing them with greater and greater and greater tyranny. So, they took far more drastic action. For starters, they disobeyed their government. I mean, folks, they were considered at the time to be traitors, criminals, and tax cheats. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just a tax protest. I mean, it was open lawlessness. They went out on those boats. They took those tubs and containers of tea, and they threw them overboard. Or have you forgotten what the Tea Party was all about? I mean, when the king came and said, put down your weapons, they turned around and said, not today. And we had a revolution. Now we have a republic. Now we have a constitution. Now we have something that is far greater than just the will of one man in a faraway land. We know who won. I mean, if we look back with hindsight, which is always 20/20, we cheer for the rebels, right? Isn't that what we do? But make no mistake about it. When you're cheering for the founders and for the framers of our Constitution and for the men who put their lives and their liberty and their fortunes and their sacred honor on the line, you're cheering for people who were lawbreakers and, according to the king, traitors. And you should. You should. Just imagine if 10 or 20 million Americans decided this July 4th that enough was enough. And they sent a letter to the president and to the Congress that today things are going to be different. Today, we're declaring our independence from traitors and tyrants domestically. Today, we're not going to pay any more federal taxes. In fact, today, we're not going to pay our bills. We're not going to fund the banks. Today, we're going to preserve that money and hold it back, and we're not going to give it in until you leave. Most people would look at them and say, these people are extremists, nutcases, domestic terrorists. So I have to ask you, why do you believe in a double standard? This is the same standard that you rail against when the liberals and the progressives use it on you. Why do you believe in a double standard? Why would the American citizenry today throw under the bus those who would do exactly what they cheered for 237 years ago? I'm going to tell you why. Because we have been taught all of our lives, in our schools, in our churches, everywhere that we have gained education, by our parents, by law enforcement, by government, that obedience to authority is the highest virtue, and that disobedience is the lowest form of performance and participation. They prize obedience to the system over liberty and freedom. So here's the question. Do you? Those people who sit out there and make disparaging comments about government and all of the ills that surround it are actually unwilling to take the steps necessary to correct it. They want a bellyache. They want to whine. They want to say, I did my part, I voted. But that's not where your responsibility, your duty, and your obligation end. Most of the people who claim to be zealous advocates for constitutional government are unwilling to do what it takes to correct the problem. They're unwilling to take and make the sacrifices that today are voluntary, where tomorrow they'll be mandatory and not at your discretion. They claim to be supporters of freedom, supporters of liberty, supporters of the Second Amendment, supporters of the First Amendment. And they seek a political solution that can never, ever occur. Here's why. Government will never approve anything or give you the opportunity to do anything that will endanger their power. There is not a single instance of a tyrant throughout history who has willingly given up his power and authority. None. There's an old bumper sticker out there I've seen years ago that says, if voting made a difference, it would be illegal. You know why? Because there's two parties in this nation, and both parties dance to the same puppet master. They may be a little different on social programs. They may be a little bit different on this or that or the next thing. But ultimately, both of them work for one thing and one thing alone. Your enslavement and demise, and their growth in power, ego, and greed. We're going to have to make a choice, America. We've reached the T in the road. We're either going to move in one direction or the other. The question is, which direction are we headed? We're going to take a break. When we return, we'll talk more about it.
Howell County Bank branch of Banketh there, locally owned and operated since 1900. It's not what they do, it's how they do it. Roger London, president of Howell County Bank. Is it true that banks don't have money to lend?
And that's just not true. All the area banks have money to loan. We certainly do, and it's just a case of lack of confidence right now. We certainly have money to loan and welcome customers to come in and apply.
At Howell County Bank, it truly is not what they do, but how they do it. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
When Obama said he seeks to fundamentally transform America, he means fundamentally alter the nature of our republic, which in turn means to fundamentally reshape society and the citizens' relationship, our relationship to the federal government. The sovereign, we the people, become the subjects. Some people follow this willingly. Some people endorse it. I say hell no.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
You know, our founders didn't ask or beg or say please after it became apparent that that no longer worked. In fact, they wrote it down so that you'd thoroughly understand it. Here's what they said. But when a long train of abuse and usurpation pursues invariably the same object, which evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That was a declaration from a foreign king. That was a declaration from a tyrant from afar. You've heard the oath of office. All of these politicians and all of these people who swear an oath take an oath to defend this nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Today, the enemy is not foreign. Today, the tyrant is not foreign. Today, the tyrant is domestic. The difference is that because the tyrant is domestic, we have to do this in a peaceful fashion through civil disobedience. And here's the reason why. If we use violence as the method by which to gain change, we will have destroyed that which we have built and have based our entire foundation upon. So our goal is never to do this by means of violent methods. It is to do it with outside the system, but peacefully. And the way to accomplish that is via civil disobedience. Here's the way that you have to look at this. Rosa Parks, perfect example, stood up and said, "Today, I am not going to sit in the back of that bus. Not today." Now, those people who have done a lot of homework on her know that she had some communist affiliations and some other issues. She was an agitator, a professional agitator. But it doesn't change the message of what she did. And what we need today are 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 million American Rosa Parks. Their goal is to keep you dumbed down. Their goal is to keep you frightened and terrified from participation. And I can tell you that it works. because I hear many, many, many people who will invariably tell you that if you participate in this, your life is at threat. You'll be audited by the IRS. Your possessions will be taken from you. I submit that you've just proven my point. If what you have to worry about is that government will come down upon you like an iron fist or a jackbooted thug, then that's all the more reason why 90 days that will change the world must work. Remember that our government has ceased to be a protector of individual liberty, which tells you that it is not only your right, but your duty to alter or abolish that form of government. And alter is the key operative word. How many Americans today are willing to do that? Are willing to put their lives on the line? Are willing to put their fortune on the line? Are willing to put their iPod on the line? And their nightly session with some game show or Kim Kardashian. I mean, really, our founders put it all on the line. They lost their lives, many of them. Their children were killed in the war. Their homes were burned. They were bankrupted. They were left destitute and homeless. They were terrified. They were threatened. They were ostracized. And you're worried about your credit report being dinged? Please. Please. If that's your sole commitment to the Republic, then you're part of the problem and not the solution. If your greatest fear is, well, I'm not prepared to go for 90 days because I don't have enough food in my house, then I submit. Shut off your cable television. Stop buying 2 lattes a day. Bring your lunch to work. How about putting forth an effort? How about making a commitment? How about a family change jar, if that's what it comes to? How about holding a garage sale and getting rid of all of that junk in your basement or out in your garage? And then putting that money towards that which you know to be necessary. Even the most vocal people today are frightened and terrified to do the right thing. They are unwilling to fight corruption and injustice, and they bang their heads against the brick wall, begging, and I mean begging, for the slave master to cease the beatings. Where is the spirit of open resistance that we've seen exemplified by our founders? By women to get the vote. By blacks to get civil rights. Where is the spirit of open resistance of the people who protested against the Vietnam War? Who now happen to, by the way, run government, and the man that they protested against is who they have become. Where is a single candidate that will stand up and advocate the dissolution of the tyranny and the corruption in our government? There are no Patrick Henrys. There are no Thomas Paines. There are no Thomas Jeffersons. There are no James Madisons. Where have they all gone? Most Americans are unwilling to sacrifice to resist tyranny. And guess what? They even get nervous when they hear you talk about it. So why is that? I mean, are we at a point where our oppression is less than what our founders put up with? I highly doubt it. I just posted a story this morning about how the NSA is building a facility in Utah, 17 football fields in size, that is nothing but a gigantic hard drive to monitor and save every piece of information and build a dossier on every single American. We're surveilled. Every phone call you make, every email you send. The IRS came out the other day and said that they don't even have to have a warrant to review your email. The national government today comes out and openly states that they can save personal information about you for as long as 5 years or longer based on their need. It used to be 90 days. The fact that it used to be at all ought to scare the living heck out of you. I mean, we only had about 18% of the population in the United States that firmly believed in the Revolutionary War against a tyrant from afar. I submit to you that the number of Americans that are at the position where they believe that action must be taken to restore our republic is far greater than that. Congress has an approval rating of what? 8, 9%? You know what that is? That's the friends and family plan that Congress is on. That's their families and their immediate friends and those people who have bribed them and lobbied them with money to do their bidding. They're the only approvals they have. If a few small taxes on tea and paper and stamps was enough to get our founders to rise up against tyranny, how dare we think that where we're at today is not justification enough? Let me ask you a question. Do you think Thomas Jefferson or James Madison, if they were alive today, I mean, if we could bring our founders back and put them in the modern world, do you think that they would be willing to accept the TSA sexually groping them at an airport to travel? Do you think that they'd be willing to accept the Department of Homeland Security going in with a security letter, a national security letter to your bank, and stating that they have the right to look in your safe deposit box and remove things from there, and then ordering that bank to remain silent and not tell you that it occurred? Do you think that they would be willing to accept what the NSA is building out in Utah today? Do you think that they'd be willing to accept the National Defense Authorization Act, the Monsanto Protection Act, the Missouri Monsanto Protection Act that was just instituted by a lapdog of Monsanto? Do you think that Patrick Henry would be willing to lose half of all of his well-earned and hard-worked-for assets so that it could be redistributed to the hapless and the lazy? Do you think that George Washington would be willing to give up 50% of everything that he earned to pay for a group of wars he didn't agree with, and that for all intents and purposes betrayed the spirit of what our nation was founded upon? I mean, after all, we're selling them something we don't even believe in ourselves anymore. Isn't that right? What are we selling them? We're offering to sell them democracy, which we're not. We're a republic. Democracy is mob law, mob rule, thugocracy. Might makes right. A republic says even if the mob decides to go in one direction, the rule of law protects us from that mob. That's not what we're selling over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Do you think George Washington would have tolerated that? I think not. In fact, they didn't even tolerate a standing army. We're going to take a break. When we return, we'll talk more about this. It's important for you to understand what you can do to change the world. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Salji Ingrasso. A busy week coming up in Congress with a couple of key issues coming into focus.
The Senate begins taking up a long list of amendments to the gun control bill, starting with a compromise over background checks. As for immigration, the so-called Gang of Eight will unveil its compromise plan on Tuesday.
Fox News Radio's Rich Johnson, a close vote seen on background checks on gun buyers. Only 3 Republican senators are expected to vote for the compromise bill. A squeaker in Venezuela's special presidential election to replace the late Hugo Chavez, and the challenger isn't giving up yet.
Nicolas Maduro, the acting president and Hugo Chavez second in command, wins Sunday's presidential election in Venezuela, even though the opposition says it's by such a small margin, just over 1%. They are demanding a recount. Maduro is confident he'd still win.
Fox News Radio's Evan Brown. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Visit our outstanding sponsors, West Plains Pawn, located on Route 160, about a mile past Walmart on the right-hand side. West Plains Pawn can be found on the web at westplainspawn.com. You can also reach them via telephone at 417-256-3000. The battery station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. They can be reached via telephone at 417-257-7799. They can also be found on the web at batterystation.com. My friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. Brian can be reached at 870-492-4030, and he's located at 3225 Route 62, 1/2 mile east of Walmart in Mountain Home. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. They have an outstanding lunch special buffet. You can have salad as well as pizza and other pasta, so you can have something tasty and something healthy. Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 2930116. Bill Stone does remodeling, custom and new construction, light commercial, farm work, pretty much the gamut. If you're interested in doing some kind of a new project, make sure that you give Bill Stone at Stone Construction an opportunity to bid on that job. And my dear friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, number 2 Evans Arcade, right off the square in West Plains. She can be reached via telephone at 255-2253. She's got the best damn bakery in 100 miles. And thanks so much to our phone line sponsor, Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. You can call us on the Wits End Classic Barbershop hotline. He is on the square in West Plains. Excellent opportunity for you to get your hair cut. Get over there and visit.
The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry.
Online at westplainspawn.com.
Top of the line new and used optics from Nikon, Leopold, Burris, Redfield, Zeiss, and Schmidt & Bender. Ask about their selection of binoculars, laser sights, and night vision goggles. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
Weather is a service of News Talk 107.1 The Point. Contact Josh or Cody at 255-2548 for more information on making weather sponsorships part of your marketing plans.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, a mostly cloudy sky, mostly cloudy through the day, maybe a thunderstorm, the high 74. Clouds and a few thunderstorms tonight, low 60. Partly sunny tomorrow, high 82. Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a couple of thunderstorms, high 78. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
America's Voice Now, delivering truth over mainstream propaganda every single day. Hi, my name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. Join me daily for important guests and my unique slant on hot topics in the news. Visit americasvoicenow.org for even more news, articles, and commentary, and watch our show streaming live to your PC. Share your morning with me. Get educated, informed, motivated, and activated. America's Voice Now, right here on 107.1.
I ask you a question. Would Thomas Jefferson have gone along with the disarmament of America that's racing through our states and our state legislatures today and our federal system? You think he would have tolerated that? I mean, realistically, would he have been willing to tolerate disarmament? He's the one who said the purpose of the Second Amendment is a last resort against to defend our nation against tyranny. Do you think he would have been accepting of 50% of his money taken from him to be looted by the parasite class of Congress? I mean, really, that's what they are. You've heard me say it before. The ticks now outweigh the dog. The problem is that we need to stop begging for our freedom. And we need to demand it. But a demand without power and the capability to enforce that demand is an empty threat. 90 Days That Will Change the World changes the tone and the tenor of that. It says we're not only demanding it, but we're going to starve you out. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Michael. For one thing, I know you, and sometimes it makes me uncomfortable when you're using the T word. But then I think back to what Barry Goldwater said about meekness and defense of liberty being no virtue, and extremism in its defense. You know the quote I'm talking about.
Yes.
And then I think about that, and then I pull myself back to reality. The fact is, you know, like the RFID, Real ID program going down, people ought to be camping out in the offices.
Well,
and they're not.
I've got an answer for that whole question that you've just brought up.
And
about Americans being afraid.
Yeah, complacency is a big part of it. You're getting 3 hots in a cot, and it's pretty hard to get motivated. And life's pretty good for a lot of people. It's not for a lot. I mean, there's something 20 million unemployed.
But if three hots in a cot is your sole motivation in life, we can get that. You can go to a prison and get that every day for free. But I'm going to tell you something. Sam Adams said something that nailed this down to the wall. If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hand which feeds you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. That is the spirit by which... Excuse me? I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's just old words to a lot of people, Mike. You know it as well I do. They're still true.
I do, but you know what? We have 315 million people in this country. We only need 5 or 10 million to actually get the ball to roll.
I agree. Something like 10% of the people of the population actually fought in the Revolutionary War, is my understanding. They actually stood up and did something.
Agreed, and we were successful at it. Yeah. And those men all starved in Valley Forge, and they went without food, and they brought their own weapons, and they wore their own clothing, and they put in their own money to travel to get to where the army was. Those men were willing to sacrifice their time, their money, their labor, their effort, and frankly their lives for a principle which was far greater than themselves. And the vast majority of America is so complacent and so wrapped up in apathetic self-interest that, for all intents and purposes, July 4th of this year may come and go, because most Americans won't have the courage of their convictions to stand up and say, you know what? Life is not so sweet, nor peace so dear, and I'm willing to accept the chains.
And as far as disarmament, you know, people talk about the fact that how could anyone stand against a modern army? Well, evidently they haven't heard of the Viet Minh, the Khmer Rouge, the Libyans, the people in Lebanon.
How about a more current example of the Afghanistans?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
I mean,
Syria's
here you've got a group of people that held back the entire Russian army for 20 years, and now has held back the entire United States Army for 13 years. And these people can't string, 5 sentences together in a coherent concept, and they don't have the material or the collective coordination of a nationalized army. They're just a bunch of ragtag ruffians who are holding back an entire nation. And they've done it twice.
That's true, but they've been fighting battles since Alexander the Great.
Hey, listen, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that it can be done. And until Americans are willing to stand up and take this bull by the horns, we're going to...
People talk about giving up their guns just because the government is so big and huge. I mean, huge can be a disadvantage as well as an advantage. Start tripping over your own bootstraps. We see that in our Army all the time.
Well, the simple truth is this. It's up to us to make the determination that we're not going to allow ourselves to be disarmed, as an example.
Exactly right.
Right? I mean, we can either sit here and we can just whine about it while we actually buckle the chains on ourselves and turn the key, or we can do something about it.
Yes.
I get it. Most people are scared, and with good reason. Our government has the capacity for great violence. We live in a current police state. You only have not heard it on the 5 mainstream media outlets because they don't have a vested interest in supporting you and or your cause. And the willingness of our politicians to crush dissent and take out anyone who threatens their power. Hey, I don't disagree with the fact that Americans are scared, but it's proving my point. If you're that terrified,
if they're just scared, I think they're just complacent. I mean, they're happy with what's going on and they don't care. It's not goring their ox.
Well,
unless you've gone up against administrative justice, you don't really understand the shadow government that exists. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You know that.
Well, I'm only reminded of the phrase of Patrick Henry. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of slavery and chains? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
A lot of people are choosing the chains. They really are.
Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, caller.
Hello there.
Good morning.
Michael, this is Richie from Branson.
Hi, Richie.
In 2 Corinthians 3:17, it says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. On the Liberty Bell, it says from Leviticus, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants therein. Until the people get their heads screwed on right and figure out whose law we should be following, this country is not going to go anywhere. I'm sorry, Mike, I hate to say it, but the people have to realize that there's man's law and there's God's natural law.
Well, here's the deal. Our founders built this on God's natural law, and then they turned around and provided for it a rule of law that men could follow. It was Jefferson who said, forget men's good intentions, but bind them down with the chains of a constitution. And unfortunately, what's been allowed to happen is that our nation has gradually and over time allowed those chains to come off. Yes. And we've unleashed the beast. The problem is that the beast is now pillaging and raping and murdering our village. And, the barbarians aren't at the gate. They've broken through it, and they're eating our children.
Yes,
Thank you for the call. Here's the deal, folks. You've been trained to measure your worth, not by what you produce, not by how good you are as a person, not by how good you are at your job, not by how good you take care of your family, but by whether you are law-abiding. Well, let me tell you something about law-abiding. Law passed by government that is tyrannical in its nature is not law. That's the simple truth. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds of instances of it in our own past history. We don't even have to go over and outside of our own borders to identify that. You wear that law-abiding as a badge of honor. I'm here to tell you that our founders were willing to stand up and put their lives, their liberty, and their sacred honor on the line to say, just because you call it law doesn't make it so. I'm a law-abiding gun owner. Common sense gun control for law-abiding Americans. Hey, if you want to stand there with your gun while they rape and pillage your neighborhood and your home because you're law-abiding, go right ahead. But we have a way to defeat that civil disobediently and politely and peacefully. But it's up to you.
If you're looking for great deals on iPads or Kindles, look no further than your neighborhood Radio Shack authorized sales center. They've got great deals on the latest iPads and Kindles. Maybe you need a new GPS or an MP3 player to get your music library ready for those barbecues. Whatever your electronic needs, stop by your local neighborhood Radio Shack authorized dealer in West Plains at 1408 Southern Hills Shopping Center or call 417-256-1819.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
When Obama said he seeks to fundamentally transform America, he means fundamentally alter the nature of our republic, which in turn means to fundamentally reshape society and the citizens' relationship, our relationship to the federal government. The sovereign, we the people, become the subjects. Some people follow this willingly. Some people endorse it. I say hell no.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
Last time on the Dennis Miller Show.
At an event thrown by the website Politico, Bill Gates said, quote, "Some days I wish we had a system like the UK, quote, to give Obama more power." Yeah, some days I wish Windows worked like Apple. How's that, Billy Boy? These guys are fetishistic. He's in the, he wants it to work more like the UK. He wants to see Obama padding around in one of those powder
Weekdays
blues.
from 9 till noon, it's the Dennis Miller Zone on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1. The further we reach out, the closer we all become. Hey, it's Nate Cooper here with the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point. I invite you to join us Sunday mornings. The program is a combination of local and national known speakers. So I encourage you to do two things. Listen in on Sunday mornings from 8 until noon and find out how you can become a sponsor of one of the programs. Just call our offices at 255-0427. Beyond the Point, Sundays on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
You know, Thomas Jefferson had a way of putting things that every man could grasp. And here's what he said about following the law. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because the law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. That's a powerful statement. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Max here, Mike.
Good morning.
Do you recall in October of this past year during a campaign speech, Obama said a vote for me is a vote against our enemies?
Yes, I do.
And nobody in the media, of course, would follow up on it. Not even Romney or any Republicans would hardly bring it out. And to me, that's a dangerous statement,
Well, we now know who the enemy is.
Well, sure we know who the enemy is.
The DHS has bought 2 billion rounds of ammo to resolve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no outside extra national authority. So therefore, 2 billion rounds of ammunition has been bought to deal with the internal problem of Obama's enemies.
Mm-hmm. I tell you what, he's been a divider since day one, and there's people smarter than me. I don't understand why locally that I know how they could vote for the man. I don't know.
Well, I get it. Hey, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Thanks for the input on that. You know, you have to understand something, people. You know, the ideas that Obama puts forth, and that this administration and our Congress, and by the way, George Bush before him, make no mistake about it, I am not a party player. Both parties have betrayed us. George Bush gave us the Patriot Act, probably the most treasonous document ever submitted into law since the Alien and Sedition Act, or Acts. The Sedition Act was the equivalent of the National Defense Authorization Act and the Patriot Act. But they gave broader powers to the government even than the Sedition Act, which prompted, I might add, Thomas Jefferson and Madison and Adams to stand up and nullify those federal laws within their states and say that a law that exceeds the constitutional authority granted to the government by the people is null and void and of no force. So law-abiding to most Americans means doing what you're told to do by the government. That's essentially how they define law-abiding. They speak of the law as if it was handed down by Moses on stone tablets. It's really whatever the politicians decide for it to be, to command you. Do you think that obedience to a bunch of robber barons and carpetbaggers in Washington, D.C. is being law-abiding? Really? Holy smoke. I mean, look, we all know that there are basic foundational laws of nature that we shouldn't cross. We know that it's not right to steal. We know that it's not right to injure another. We know that it's not right to injure another's property. And guess what? We don't even need a law to tell us that. Now, we know that there's a certain segment of the population that couldn't care less what the law says. But what's right and wrong doesn't depend on a group of legislators and pontificating marshmallows up in Washington telling us this is the law, and demonizing and demagoguing those who are unwilling to follow it because it's tyrannical in its nature. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because the law is often but tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the right of the individual. Why are you so proud of being law-abiding? Is it because you blindly obey whatever law they hand down? Whatever arbitrary command comes out of Washington or Jefferson City or your state capital, Albany? I mean, they're telling you in Albany to come in and have your fingerprints taken and have your magazine stamped with a serial number so that they and you can be registered. I don't understand how you cannot believe in civil disobedience on that. I don't get it. Even if that means that you will have to be arrested for protesting it. Even if that means you may have to spend some time and some money and some effort and put your life and your families and your home and everything else at risk. Because it's treasonous for you to do that to yourself. Treason is not only an external visage or principle. Treason is not something which is always external. You can be guilty of treason to yourself. And going down there and handing in your firearms like a good little sheep is committing treason against you and your family. The people in Nazi Germany who knew where those train cars were going and were still willing to pay their taxes to fund that, they were law-abiding. They assisted. They knew those camps were being built. They knew what those ovens and those tall smokestacks were for. And they continued to pay their taxes. It supported an incomprehensible level of evil to most Americans. I mean, please. This is not limited to Nazi Germany, by the way. Stalin did it. Mao did it. Lenin did it. Pol Pot did it. Chavez did it. I mean, people, Castro is doing it. We're paying for our own demise. I mean, what don't you get about that? When you are paying your taxes in and you are feeding the beast, you are participating in your own demise. Do you support what we do with the taxpayer money today? Is it okay for abortion clinics to get money? They can sit and deny it all they want. Everybody knows, everybody, whichever side of the political fence they sit on, that money is fungible. And so if you say to me, I don't have the budget to do this unless you give me that money, and I give you the money and I say, great, you can have this money, but you can't do something prohibited with it. Then what you do is you use the money that I give you to allow you to do whatever it is that you want, but you take money that you have that is now freed up to go do that thing from which you are prohibited. I mean, look, if we give Planned Parenthood money, it frees up the money that they would use for whatever else they do and allows them to use that money to commit abortion and murder. I mean, nobody doubts that. Nobody who's intellectually honest, at any rate. Please, you have an obligation to pay your fair share. But your fair share does not include giving money to Obama's cronies to build a car called the Fisker in a foreign nation, or to send our battery technology over to China. It doesn't include you paying your fair share to dedicate and give money to Obama's banker pals. J.P. Morgan just announced the other, or was it Goldman Sachs? I don't know. $6.5 billion in profit. Is it noble to fund all of this? Is it noble to fund a war over in Afghanistan that he's prosecuting with drones that are killing innocent people simply because they're collateral damage and acceptable? Is it noble for you to fund that exact same scenario, which will shortly be coming to the United States of America? Make no mistake about it, and mark my words. Missouri just passed an anti-drone act. You watch those states that don't, and even those that do. We've already got the Secret Service saying we're going to come in and arrest a sheriff if he doesn't follow the law that they've laid down in Colorado about firearms confiscation. You've got to be kidding me. That's an intrusion on a state's rights, a violation of the 10th Amendment right there. Here's the problem, people. You've forgotten the number one important thing that you need to know. You own yourself, your life, and what you do with it. And it's not theirs to act with as a play toy, or to experiment with, or to suck it dry. The rest of this week, we're going to focus in on this issue because I think that either this thing is going to get legs, and it's going to get legs quick, or it's going to die on the vine because of apathetic Americans who are unwilling to stand up and put forth the risk to gain the reward that's necessary. But America, mark my words and make no mistake about it, you're either going to be all in or you're all out. This is America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. Please visit us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And find this and every other show that we do posted up on YouTube every day at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. I appreciate you. Just remember that the only thing necessary...
From West Plains, Missouri, it's KBMV Birch Tree, the Ozarks' best news talk.